uh, uh. One time. Get it started like this. Yes, you are now listening to the sound of Sports Reports as Ordered. And as we travel through the nation, we find ourselves in the Midwest, previewing the Big 18. You know what I'm saying? Mr. Logical got all the data. He talking about Rutgers is going to crash the playoff because he represents New Jerusalem, even though he was born in Texas and raised in PA. Millville to Teaneck, Princeton, Seton Hall, everything in between. Do not bring feelings to a fact fight. And I am the unorthodox statistician, live from the Alamo, going left so much you thought I was southpaw. Do me a favor, like, review, subscribe, do all the good things, do all the free things. And let's get this thing started with Get It Off My Chest. So I want to know, man, like I was talking to people, right? Yeah, and I said, yo, I got a podcast. And they was like, podcasting what? And I was like, yo, you ain't trying to see me on this mic, though. You know what I'm saying? So it made me think about Noah Lyles.
Sure.
And, you know, I was thinking about how he's getting a little flack, a little too much flack for my liking because, you know, people in one vein say, I want these athletes to say whatever. I don't want them to do the coach speak thing and like be all bubble wrapped and insulated. I want my athletes to talk their stuff. So then Noah Lyles came out here and was like, yo, world champions of what? And then y'all tried to twist the argument on him and be like, hey, we won the gold medal, so now we're the world champions. He said the NBA champions weren't world champions. He didn't say stack the deck against the world, win a gold medal, and you get to call yourself world champion. Mr. Logical, why people on Noah Lyles' neck like this?
I don't know, but honestly, I didn't think about that whole world champion or what, Olympic champion, until you said it when we were talking earlier. Like, that really doesn't qualify what he was saying. Like, his argument was the Denver Nuggets weren't the world champion. My argument is that it's the best league in the world, so forth and so on. If you had like a UEFA Cup kind of Champions League tournament with all the top basketball teams, they would the team that plays in the NBA probably would still win. But Noah's getting slack and flack and heat, and this is because it doesn't sound authentic. It sounds fabricated. It sounds like he's clout chasing when he talks. And we recently, I believe the media piece that has him kind of in the limelight now is this conversation back and forth between him and Tyreek Hill. And Tyreek Hill said, I'm faster than him. I'm like, yeah, but like I said, my money still will be on Noah Lyles. But he was at some kind of event and they asked him about it. He was like, who's this cheetah guy? Like, I don't even know his real name. I'm like, so you know what, guys, you know his nickname, and he's one of the most popular players in the most popular sport in America.
And don't be sleeping on Real Madrid, Mike.
I mean, he went to, he played in a couple of Super Bowls. He's the fastest dude in the league. Like, he probably has the biggest. He has a podcast. I mean, like, you know who he is. You know his nickname. He's on everything. He's on people's podcasts. He's puts his own videos out there of him getting juked out of his cleats by teenage kids at his camps. Like, Tyreek Hill is everywhere. So you know who Tyreek Hill is. And I think that's the part. Is like with Noah, I believe that, like I said, I gave him credit for talking this shit before the Olympics started. He made that statement last summer. And then this summer was going to be his day of reckoning where he was going to back it up. And we talked about this earlier. The issue with him is that he didn't win by the margins that his mouth was writing for him. Mm-hmm. He needed to win by half second at least in both of those races, or be the clear winner. Like, at the line, we can all see you're first. The first one, people still talk about the Jamaican runner had his toe over the line first, and it's the first torso that crosses the line. So he had a better lean.
You got to win with your chest.
So he won and then he got third in the 200. COVID, wheelchair, being whatever your health situation is, you got to handle it. I personally would have hobbled out. I wouldn't want to be seen like just kind of just being drug out in a wheelchair. I would have rather just walk real slow. But that's the case.
That was real Paul Pierce like.
If he would have, and we were talking about what his expectation probably was, I'm going to go here, I'm going to kill it, and then I'm going to come back here, I'm going to be the media darling. And I just made up this thing on the fly in my conversations, like the darling scale. The women of the Olympic gymnastics, we don't rarely watch gymnastics competitions in between the Olympics. It's not that common. I know Livy Dunn down at LSU has a big NIL deal. That was kind of pushed by the brands that were, following LSU. And it's the SEC, so they're putting money into it. But we don't really follow these people. So what happens is you come back and you do the circuit. You win your gold medal, you do Jimmy Fallon, you do Jimmy Kimmel, you're on random people's podcasts, you're on the morning shows on either the Fox Sports channel or ESPN, you're doing the rounds, you do Good Morning America, you do the Today, like you do all of these different media shows, and then maybe you get in a movie, you get in a TV show. Like the media sets your value to the world after that. I think he was trying to hedge his bet by saying, I'm going to do all this. And like Mike said, you got to sweep it. You got to win the 100, 200, and you got to win the 4x100. And if he could have got on the 4x400, because I know he used to be a 400 runner, and they were talking about that, but you would have to be like on like this epic historic run.
Even though,
like
you said, his competition, that ran the 200 came in sixth. You know what I'm saying? Because they are not the same.
The guy who won the 200 from Botswana, he came in sixth in the 100.
Yeah.
And then after the 200, he said he couldn't be the face of track and field because he's not loud and arrogant like Noah. So I think that's the backlash.
Right. So
I can't be a media darling if people consider you loud and arrogant, but you haven't won enough to be loud and arrogant.
Right. So I think that the problem is that Noah Lyles wanted to be bigger than track. He wanted to, as Styles P would say, he wanted his name to ring bells. When you say Noah Lyles, you know exactly who we're talking about. You know exactly why we're talking about them. That's what he wanted. He bet on himself. He didn't win, so to speak. He still got bronze. Hell, what I'm saying? But for what he was talking, he needed another gold medal.
The accomplishments didn't match the bravado.
So I think, like I said, my problem is that when we talk about sports, whether it's the NBA, NFL, whatever sport it might be, the number one thing that we say or, lament is that where's the personalities at? What I'm saying? Everybody gets on the microphone and is a school choir boy or whatever and just says all the right things, doesn't ruffle any feathers.
Oh, they're just boring. Some of them are just flat out
boring. They're just boring. But every so often, you get a supernova that comes through and shakes things up. Like we talked about Floyd Mayweather, we talk about LeBron, but they had accomplished some other things. Like even before LeBron had won titles, he had MVPs, so he's like the best player in the league, all this kind of stuff. So he had the room.
And he had the opportunity every year he had the opportunity to show this is my level in the sport that I play. The track and field has events, but they have like circuits. So they have like the Diamond League. And I imagine that Puma probably has a league and Adidas probably has like a circuit. And there's probably certain places they go. Like they probably go to Dubai and run some stuff. They go to Qatar. So I don't think everybody competes, but the Olympics is the expectation that every top athlete in track and field is going to be there. So that's where you can get your claim to fame. So Noah Lyles can go on and win and run all these other races, but it won't have the same effect because Usain Bolt lost races in between the Olympics. He just didn't lose in Beijing, London, or Rio. But he lost races in between that people don't really think about.
I think that's the thing Noah Lyles was looking for, though. He wanted to be more than a every 4-year athlete. He wanted to be a part of the national conscience because, we always talk about how a lot of these sports shows talk about the same thing every single day. Like I
Every
told
day.
you, like I told you, for instance, I was listening to a podcast last week. Monday, it was, hey, Florida State and Clemson to the Big 12. Tuesday, it was, why doesn't the Big 12 want Miami? Wednesday, it was, oh, the Big 12 doesn't want Florida State and Clemson after all. Thursday was, well, can Louisville sneak out the conference? Like, so it was just
The
a whole
same
bunch of
conference.
regurgitated different ways to have the same topic. So Noah Lyles is coming along like, well, hey, like, let me jump into this. And I don't see a problem with it. Like, granted, it didn't work out for him, but I don't see a problem with it because I'd rather you talk shit or whatever, talk trash, lose, than win and then come after the fact like I'm the man and try to be boisterous, a la Steph Curry, who's quiet as a church mouse until his team gets a 12-point lead, and now he King Kong Dick Daddy. You know what I'm saying? Like, just walking around the court now, like he been on fire all game long. You know what I'm saying? Just like, he had a 1-for-9 game in the Olympics, and then, he scored 36 points, and everybody was like, give him the MVP, as if the other game didn't happen. So what my whole point in the conversation was, I blame us, you know what I'm saying? Because we're the ones that give this stuff attention. Like, I was talking about Donald Trump the other day. Like, every time something comes up, like, they say his name and he's like, yo, free advertisement, whether it's good or bad, it's all publicity and I'm here for it. That's Noah Lyles.
Yes, and the thing that works for Donald Trump, it works for Steph, it works for Aaron Rodgers, it works for LeBron, it works for the Cowboys, it works for all these teams, that they are legitimately polarizing. And you asked me earlier, like, how do you get to the state of you being polarized? I'm like, well, you got to achieve to a certain level to where you have this ultimate love affair with you as an individual or team, or while simultaneously having a lot of animosity that runs concurrently. So it's like you have Cowboys. People hate the Cowboys. We had a whole conversation in the hot box about them having a winning culture. People are like, oh, they didn't win a chip. I'm like, yeah, but they won 36 games in the last 3 years. I'm pretty sure a lot of teams in the league would take 12-5, 12-5, 12-5 over whatever their records were, because not many teams had that record. Like, I don't think that many teams won 36 games over the last 3 years. We talked about Minnesota went 13-4 one year. Kirk Cousins get hurt last year. Now they're drafting top 10. So it's like, to have that kind of consistency, but someone had to be like, no, I hate this team so much that I'm going to argue against whatever concept you have as far as them being a winning culture. And like me being neutral, I'm like, well, this is why they get the attention that they get, because we're talking about 12 wins and you feel this way about the 12 wins and I feel this way about the 12 wins, makes them polarizing. With Noah Lyles, I think he was trying to create that, but he didn't achieve the status. Like, if you think about like a restaurant, because you're like, well, how come? Because I said about Floyd Mayweather, he's like, what about Bud Crawford? I'm like, well, you need more than just the record. You need a little flair. So like a restaurant, everyone can talk about how great the steak restaurant is, and the potatoes can be great. The mac and cheese can be great. The asparagus can be wonderful. The ambiance can be dope, but then the steak comes out and it's a little overcooked. So it's like, I get it. It wasn't terrible, but I need it all to work. And when it all works, then everyone's like, yo, I went to this place, but it cost too much. Or they were trying to be too exclusive. Or the wait staff was rude. They weren't attentive. Like, I wanted my steak cooked this way and they wouldn't change their mind. Meanwhile, somebody else is like, yo, I like the fact they didn't let everybody in. I like the fact that the wait staff was straight and to the point. They told them, hey, we only cook ribeyes here. These are the sizes. This is what you get. So I personally like that, because like, if you only do ribeyes, I know you can only do that correctly. But if you're like, oh, I want it this way, so now we have that tapestry where we can kind of argue back and forth. Noah Lyles didn't create that buzz for people to argue for. So now he looks, I wouldn't say silly, but now he just looks like you're just grasping for clout, even though he could be legitimately I don't know who Tyreek Hill is, but I think he's grasping for clout at this point, because you didn't rise to the level of your accomplishment, didn't rise to the level of your mouth. And it's like, why are we still talking about you? And
yes,
that's the part. Yeah,
yes,
that's the part.
I think that he's enjoying his time in the media. Like, it didn't go the way he wanted it to go. It didn't go the way he envisioned it and planned it out. But I think that in his mind, it's like, hey, I'm still being talked about. I'm being talked about more than I would have because, like I asked you, if Noah Lyles would have said, hey, you know what? I only got the bronze in this race. Next Olympics, I'm coming back for blood and I'm going to get mine. People will be like, okay, cool, move on. But now that he's saying the things that he's saying, people are talking about him. So we created these monsters. Like the reason that these things happen is because we won't let it go. And now it's fashionable to shit on Noah Lyles. You know what I'm saying? Like now it's time to shit on him. So now everybody is just doing it because as a society, we just bag on and keep on and keep on. So if Tyreek Hill, so that's why I made the point. If Tyreek Hill came out tomorrow and was like, look, y'all, I know I'm fast, but this is an Olympic champion. Like, this is what he does. Like, for me to even think that I could beat him then everybody that's shitting on Noah Lyles would reverse and be like, oh, he made Tyreek Hill fall back. Noah Lyles is the man. So the same people that are stunting on him right now would be singing his praises. And that's why it goes back to, it's us. It's not him. It's us.
Yes, and I get your point. He did what
he did, but we had to react to it for it to pick up and for him to continue to do it.
But that's the standard for all of this. The reason that people
giving them attention.
The reason that the media, we know billionaires because a lot of them are in charge of some kind of media franchise because the media is driven by the people. I think he was trying to microwave a greater buzz in this 24/7 news cycle, but he didn't deliver to the level that the buzz I think he was trying to create. So you say you think he's content with being talked about. We've seen what happens when people win gold medals. They talked about Bruce Jenner, now Caitlyn Jenner, winning the decathlon. That was like 50 years ago. But yet, that's the only thing people know about that individual's career.
Yes, and you say that as if he didn't win a gold medal.
In the Wheaties box. But that's what I mean. That winning that gold medal, being dominant, winning it in the fashion where, because American men don't generally win or do well at the decathlon. We generally do well in the sprinting. He needed to do better because we already have the recent history of Bolt. We've already seen Bolt dominate this. So it's like, if like I said earlier, if it was 80 something and it was like Carl Lewis is beating dudes from Ireland and Estonia and Jamaica wasn't even in the Olympics or something like that, and he set a world record, it'll look one way. But we've seen Bolt literally run sideways through the tape, beating his chest, and beat men in a 100-meter race by 10 meters. So it's like we've seen that happen. So
hey, don't make me get my LeBron on. You think Carl Lewis can beat Noah Lyles in a race?
Listen, they have stopwatches. Time has been time since time. Time has been time since time, and we'll figure it out from there. But I'm saying, like, so you get you when you win the gold medal and you win and you have this acclaim, especially at the Olympics, the media will then pull you up. The women's rugby team won a bronze, but it was in such dramatic fashion. They had a superstar that was on social media.
Shout out to our friend.
The roof. Friend of the show, Lamar. So, but they won a bronze. So it's like, and then if you look at when Simone Biles wins gold, one of the other American girls probably wins silver or bronze. They still go on the show with their bronze medal because it's all part of a package of these girls.
Yeah,
so the media
have anybody rooting against them in their own country.
Noah Lyles
first, right?
I mean,
funny how that works. Yeah. But moving on now, it's time to talk about some football. So, the Big 18, we got the reigning defending national champion Michigan Wolverines without a lot of parts that they had to defend their title. We got Ohio State. Is Ryan Day going to lose his job if he loses to Michigan this year? We got Nebraska. Are they going to resurge? Is USC finally going to play defense? These are things, that we have the answers to, I think. We'll see. But let me just go ahead and say, so the other night I was talking about the Big 12 and I said, hey, like 6 or 7 teams can win this thing. It ain't like that in the Big 10. It ain't like that. We got 3 max, and to even make a bowl game in the Big 10, the biggest question is, which one of y'all going to score 20 points consistently? So that's how you make a bowl game in the Big 10. You got to score 20. So let's take it from the top. Let's start with the national champions. No J.J. McCarthy. No Blake Corum. Sanistril gone. Chris Jenkins gone. But guess what? Michigan still got the best corner in the country. Will Johnson. They still got Donovan Edwards, as Dallas might just let us know. And I was about to say, what I'm saying? But the problem is no receivers. Who's going to play quarterback? Is it going to be the one and only Jack Tuttle? Or is it going to be Alex Orgy and his parents know they could have put another vowel in that name? You know what I'm saying? So Tyler Morris is going to be Tyler Morris. I was hoping for Orgy because, not that I want to keep saying his name, but he brings that dynamic element to the offense that I think gives Michigan a different look. You got a new head coach now. So are we keeping the same identity, or is it time to move forward? Because if you start Jack Tuttle or Tyler Morris, cover your ears, Mike, you might end up as like a souped up Iowa, where you're going to play defense, ball control, smash mouth. But what I do like about Michigan this year, they got 8 home games. And out of those 8, their first 5 games are at home.
Yeah, but they
their
got
first
a tough
5
one.
games, including week 2, when the boys from Austin come a-knocking. So
that's the problem. And when you have certain levels of sport, if you have one type of player, like if you're in youth football and you have a running back that can just make people miss, you're gonna win games because you're like, yo, just give it to Mike, let him do his thing. And then Mike will make a bunch of people miss, and now it's a 70-yard touchdown for an 8-year-old. High school, if you have a dynamic wide receiver quarterback combination, just throw it up. Calvin's down there somewhere. You just throw it up, and they'll just out jump someone. And college football, if you have the seasoned quarterback, he's going to not get rattled, and he's gonna lead. He's gonna lead a team, especially a team like Texas with talent. I think Quinn Ewers is going to have a field day against Michigan in the second week because
I'm taking Michigan to win.
I'm taking Texas to win that game, mainly because my whole narrative about following the legend. Harbaugh came there, instituted his culture. Now you got to follow the legend. It's going to be a tough year. I don't think any of the other schools. I mean, you got USC that lost their quarterback, but they kept their head coach. Oregon kept their coach. You got Ohio State. So you have like 3 or 4 games where you can be completely overmatched.
So here's my question about Michigan, because I think their defense is still going to be lights out. I think they're going to push and bully people around, but the question that I have is there a certain distraction level, that Michigan has to deal with? Because, I know I invoked the name of the Cheeto earlier, but Donald Trump, Michigan is at Donald Trump levels of denial that they did anything wrong with this NCAA case. Is there any
post in NIL, like all kinds of violations?
But is there any residue left over? Is there any residue left over? Like, as far as
depends on how they want to feel. It depends on the powers that be, and if they want to throw a shitstorm, shit parade on Harbaugh's legacy. Because if they were cheating,
Jerome Moore ain't win no games. Harbaugh was coaching that shit. Jerome was just in the stadium.
Yeah, there's text messages and hand signals that'll be sent around. Like, there's no way a head coach is not going to.
Shout out to Connor Stallions, who somehow is a high school football coach now.
Yeah, that means he's dedicated to winning. If you're not cheating, you're not trying. It honestly, it might be a situation where remember we talked about Donnie. He would talk about the documentary, and it was like, oh, he was a lone wolf. He's the only referee out here, working. I'm like, that's not real. But you don't want to tug at that thread. I think Michigan might be one of those too big to fails. They'll probably get slapped with some. It might be some more investigative reports that come out, but it's from what I can guess from the way things have gone for these top high level, elite level schools. They don't want to shit on the coach's reputation because it kind of soils their product that they put out for the last 3 or 4 years. Mm-hmm. So if you basically do this investigation, say the investigation been going on this long and it goes back 6 years or something like that, and it's like, so you mean you let Michigan do all this stuff to keep them on TV and keep them in the playoff and keep Harbaugh getting paid and so forth and so on, knowing it was this bad? Then that's on you. That's on you, other people in the room. So other people got to go. And I don't think other people want to lose their jobs.
Well, the NCAA better be careful because, saying they might not even exist 10 years from now. So they can try to swing their dick around if they want to. And, Michigan's going to just ignore them just like they have been. So, it's just one of those things, where I'm sure if you're a non-Michigan fan, like if you're an Ohio State fan, somebody like that, I'm sure all this is like, the greatest thing in the world for you. But, as a Michigan fan, you don't really care. You got the national title. You're not taking it away. And if you do take it away, everybody saw us win it, so you can have it.
Yep. Which is, it's the silliest thing that they do. What's going on, Ray? It's the silliest thing that they do in college football when they take away the wins. It's like, we saw.
Just like Reggie Bush
win that Heisman. I personally thought Vince Young should have won it because I felt like he was more value to his team with less weapons. I mean, they had a lot of weapons on Texas. So what he was doing for his team offensively, I think a game without Reggie Bush, USC probably still wins.
Yeah, I agree with that.
They won't have the 50-yard big play. But Lindell White he would have had 3 touchdowns instead of 2 something like that. So I think it's so dumb.
So Michigan does have an interesting schedule, but like I said, they have 8 home games. So what does it mean? That means they get Texas at home. They start off with Fresno State, who could have been an upset pick if their coach didn't have to step down. They get USC at home 2 weeks after the Texas game. They get Minnesota for the little brown jug, the game that only I care about. But then they go to Seattle the next week. We'll see what Washington is. They get Oregon at home on November 2nd. And then the big one, they go to Ohio State. So all the teams that could give them trouble, should give them trouble outside of the Columbus boys come through Ann Arbor. So if you're Michigan, like anything less than 10-2 is a disappointment. So if you lose to Texas, like Mr. Logical said, and you lose to Ohio State, you live with that. You know what I'm saying? Like if you go 10-2, you lose to Ohio State, USC, Texas, USC, you're fine. You come out here and you lose.
You can't lose to Washington or Oregon.
Yeah, you can't lose
teams that came from the Pac-12, smaller teams. They're not meaty and beefy paws like most Big Ten teams. If
you can't lose in Champaign. You can't lose in Champaign like you almost did 2 years ago. You can't do that. So like now it makes me wonder, like I said, we'll see who the quarterback is. And I think Michigan is still live to win the Big Ten. I just don't have them winning the Big Ten because I'm a look over in Columbus, saying Ohio State with their alleged $13 million that they spent in NIL, which is wild to me because they went to Kansas State to get Will Howard. They grabbed the wrong Kansas State quarterback. They should have grabbed Avery Johnson. But they do have a hell of a quarterback room in Columbus. Problem is only one of them could play at a time. They went and got Quinshawn Judkins from Ole Miss. He has 31 touchdowns in his career, 2,275 yards. So, they got the best running back in the transfer portal. They got Denzel Burke back on defense. They got JT back on defense. I'm not even going to try to say his name. Jack Sawyer, so Jim Knowles is building something in Columbus defensively. The question is, if Ohio State somehow loses to Michigan this year, is Ryan Day gone? Is that something that you think Ryan Day thinks about when they line up against Michigan?
See, for me, because I'm not a diehard Big Ten fan, I'm not sure how deep that wound really is as far as like Ryan Day not being in Michigan,
Oh,
at
it's
least over the last
it's
couple of
deep.
years. So if it's that deep to where he's gonna go, if that's the game, then he has to coach. He has to coach for his job in that game. If the narrative and the expectation
But
is
do
you
you
lose to
think that
Michigan
he
again,
goes into those games tight, or do you think
I think absolutely. I can't imagine you going to a game where, especially last year, I believe Michigan had the talent edge. The CJ Stroud years, I think they had a better quarterback. I just don't know, like, so it's like
well, Michigan just beats them up. That's what it boils down to. Michigan pushes them around the yard.
and then that can be indicative of how he recruits. Now, if you use that as your reason for firing him, you look and say, yo, we beat up on everybody else. Why is it that this team beats up on us, and how come you haven't made any adjustments? Because you got the same film we have. You saw the same game, so it's just like, do you need to fix your philosophy? Do you need a new coordinator? Do you need to just have more moxie? Or do we need to extend you so you don't get fired, so you don't go into the game with that pressure? So it's just so many things that come up. But if it's a matter of win and you're in for next season, then you got to win. But if it's
Ryan Day's
losing your
record.
his overall record.
Yeah.
How many years?
Well, he's coached 64 games.
He's coached 64 games at Ohio State.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Mason Graham is a dog.
He said 64 games?
64 games.
56-8.
Correct.
Oh,
56-8. And a couple of those are to Michigan. So there you go. But this is the year for Ohio State as far as this is my expectation. They got their own expectations, I'm sure, that include national title. My destiny for Ohio State is y'all better play for the national title at the very least. You better beat Michigan, and you better get to the title game and see if Georgia's waiting there for you. Like nothing
Georgia?
less will do. No, I'm not picking it. I'm just saying, like, nothing less will do. Because if you're Ohio State and you get the Michigan monkey off your back, you can't lose to anybody else in the playoff but Georgia.
I mean, literally,
you just can't.
I'm gonna run down their first 6 weeks.
Yeah, this is terrible.
I want you to find the loss: Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, at Michigan State, Iowa, at Oregon.
Right there.
That's the first one.
That's the
first game they have to play.
When they go to Autzen Stadium, I think Oregon gets them. We'll get to Oregon in a second. But the way I have it mapped out in my mind is that they lose to Oregon in that game. They win out, potentially meet Oregon again in the Big Ten title game, unless another team can get there that we'll get to in a little bit. So that's what I'm saying. Like, when I look at Ohio State, you went out and got Caleb Downs from Alabama as well, who might be the best safety in the country. He's going to be a top something NFL pick in a few years. He's only a sophomore. It's like Jay-Z, right? He's only 16. You know what I'm saying? Like, so like Ohio State has no reason to not win the Big Ten this year. Like, no reason at all. You know what I'm saying? But if we're going to talk about Oregon, let's talk about Oregon. So, Dylan Gabriel, 32 touchdown passes away from becoming the all-time FBS touchdown leader. So now, of course, people going to be like, yo, he played an extra year, though. He was one of them COVID dudes. But,
yeah.
I'm saying an accomplishment is an accomplishment. So, the problem with Oregon, though, the reason why I said Ohio State, they may play Ohio State again, is because they lost a ton on defense. And they're trying to do the transfer portal thing to get it back. The good news is, Oregon. The good news is
they have a booster that's going to pay top dollars for whatever player you can get. I think that's the best.
Well, that's beyond this year. I'm talking about the current year. So let's put Mr. Logical on the clock again. All right. Dan Lanning has coached 27 games at Oregon. What's his record?
27 games?
27 games, because he plays for wins, not clicks.
21-6.
22-5.
Woo.
You know what I'm saying?
Damn,
And the funny thing about that is usually when a new coach takes over, you have one of those questionable losses. So like when Nick Saban took over Alabama, for example, they lost to Louisiana Monroe his first year, right? So you look at Dan Lanning, 5 losses, 3 of them are to Washington. You know what I'm saying? One of them was that 49-3 shellacking that Georgia put on them in that neutral site in Atlanta.
Oh, the neutral site.
Yeah, the neutral site game. That was the neutral site game in Atlanta. And then they lost a rivalry game to Oregon State, late in the season. So Dan Lanning doesn't lose to teams that he shouldn't lose to. Obviously it's going to be asking a lot to replace Bo Nix, but you went out and got the best quarterback in the transfer portal. So most people assume that it'll work. They did lose Troy Franklin, who was Bo Nix's favorite target. So, so Oregon's not without. They lost their running back, Bucky Irving. So Oregon's not without flaws. It's just that people think that they recruit so well.
They have such a talent factory, and they probably have a couple of the uniform combinations, the Nike relationship. I think that has kept them, because I can't imagine that the state of Oregon has a great depth of high school football. It's probably pocketed, a couple of schools here, a couple of districts here. They probably don't have the breadth of talent of, say, like a Pennsylvania or Ohio or Michigan, like one of these states, as far as like their high school football. But they've always been able to recruit well. And I think being able to just the uniform combinations, a lot of that to me, honestly, is enough. Like if my son's being recruited, he's like, yo, you can go to Oregon State or Oregon. I'm like, well, there's some dope Jordans that come out when you go to Oregon. And you can you probably play better. Like they recruit Hawaii very well. They seem to get Hawaii, players from that's where Mariota was from. So they tend to recruit out of state, like these certain pockets out of state that they have, that they get players up to Oregon. And now with the money in the NIL and everything else, they should be probably one of the top teams in the Big Ten. I just don't know if they are big enough up front, offensively and defensively, to handle the sheer size of teams like Wisconsin, Nebraska. These teams that don't generally run like spreads. A cold game in Iowa was rainy and windy, or even a rainy game in Oregon. Can you handle when another team like, you know what, we're not gonna throw the ball a lot. We're just gonna press you with our 6'5", 325-pound linemen.
And that's exactly the problem for Oregon is their schedule, because it starts off, Idaho, they play the Vandals, but then they get Boise the next week. Granted, it's at home, but it's Boise nonetheless. You're going into Corvallis to play Oregon State. You should be able to walk out of there with a win. Go to UCLA. And in case y'all didn't know, here is your reminder. UCLA is in Los Angeles. And USC is in Los Angeles as well. You just got to let the people know. You just got to let the people know.
They're both football schools.
Yes. So they go to UCLA. They come home for Michigan State and Ohio State back-to-back. Go to Purdue. Now, we've seen some seasons in West Lafayette, mostly Ohio State, go down the drain. They get Illinois at home before they go to Ann Arbor. Maryland, then they go to Camp Randall in Madison, Wisconsin. That's going to be a tough game, to your point, especially if we get some of that Midwest weather.
Yeah.
We get some of that precipitation going on.
It's mid-November, so like that's hit or miss. Like mid-November hit or miss is like weird everywhere. It could be 50, or it could just be one of those freak days where it's 25 and raining.
Right.
Just because of that time frame.
And see if
is that size going to be a disadvantage?
Yeah, and if the most talented team always won, then Oregon would be in the Big Ten title game. It would be a guarantee. But you have to factor these things: the precipitation. This is the first time that they've gone to some of these places. So all that, factoring all that in with what Oregon lost on defense, it's easy to see how Oregon could not fall to the back of the pack, but just not be as good as we're used to them being. Like
they can have an above average 9-3 season, and it might be the best you can get out of them after we see how they gel. Because we could talk about this, and I understand a lot of teams when they do this, the schedule. I like the first 2 weeks being somewhat preseason games. If you're not one of these teams that can kind of punch your ticket to the college football playoffs every year. So Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Florida State, uh, some like Michigan, maybe Ohio State, they can play that week one SEC matchup at a local, at an offsite, or they can play that game Texas versus Ohio State. Before they were in the same conference, Texas, Ohio State in Dallas or something like that. They can play that game week one, and as long as they just win out, which you expect them to do, because they get that one rivalry game at the end of the year. As long as they can win out, they're good to go. But these teams that generally don't get that pass, essentially, like you lose week 1 or 2, and now you're clawing your way back from 30 to try to get to 15 and stuff like that. So I like teams like Oregon having a game against Idaho week 1.
Yeah.
A little tune-up game, and then maybe even like a slightly, more ramped up. In the same state, 2 teams from Idaho coming west to play games.
And does Oregon have some of that Noah Lyles pressure that you're talking about? They starting out preseason number 3. And you know what I mean? And it's like, hey, you guys are replacing a lot. We're putting a lot of faith in you by having you ranked so high.
They should look very good for the first month of the season.
Yeah.
So by the time, because like I'm a proponent of like you don't rank teams until October. That's something I've said. You and I had this conversation before. But after that first month, I believe they start kind of moving teams accordingly. Because you'll go 3-1. Say you're like Ole Miss, and they got Ole Miss at 8 or 9, something like that, hypothetically. You go 3-1 in September, and then you get a couple of bad losses in October, and they're like, okay, yeah, you weren't really an 8. We're gonna put you where we think you are.
Well, that's why I like the top 25 is stupid to begin with, because I'm gonna rank you like number 3 Oregon or whatever. If they go out here and lose 2 games, it's gonna be they were overrated. They weren't overrated. You were wrong.
Yeah, but you got. I'm not gonna carry that.
You don't get to determine if they were overrated.
I'm not carrying that burden. You have the audacity. That is your fault. I put you in a position to win. You didn't win. You're overrated. Like, nah. So yeah, that's a little different.
Yeah. So of course, if you're gonna go there, then you got to go over to Happy Valley. Talk about the Nittany Lions. So this is another team that could find themselves in the Big Ten title game. But a lot of things have to go right. Namely, they brought in a new offensive coordinator. He goes by the name of, oh no, I lost his name. He was the offensive coordinator at Kansas last year. Oh, there he is. Andy Kotelnicki, came over from Kansas, and, they're going to run the ball down your throat. That's what Kansas did. They have Nick Singleton still. They still have Katron Allen. So the problem is, last season, they put all their eggs into the Drew Aller basket. He was supposed to be the savior. Sean Clifford was the reason that they weren't getting anything done. And you know what Drew Aller came out here and did? He averaged 6.8 yards per attempt. They threw the ball 7 air yards on his attempts. So is he the savior, or is it just more of the same? Is this just James Franklin? The good news for Penn State is that James Franklin is 4-16 against Ohio State and Michigan. But he only plays Ohio State this year.
Yeah, they have a very easy schedule.
They have a very favorable schedule. I don't know if I would call it easy.
Easy. Favorable schedule.
So they still go, because they got that October 12th at USC, and then they come off the bye week and go to Camp Randall. So that's
but we haven't seen USC transition seamlessly in a while.
No, you're right.
We haven't seen them go from either coach moving on or getting fired, or quarterback getting drafted, talent getting drafted off the team, and then they come right back successful the following year. We had it where they had Caleb Williams in place for 2 years in a row. They were a good team. We had it when they had Sam Darnold a couple years in a row. They were a good team. but they don't transition well. And I don't know if it's expectation management at that point, because USC tends to, you have the talent in your backyard. You have the cachet to get anyone from the transfer portal. You got the offensive genius at head coach. So this is going to be the first time we see, can you transition and spin up another guy that's NFL ready? Because technically, Spencer Rattler and Caleb Williams both look like NFL starters, with a lot of people, saying that Spencer Rattler should be a starter, probably even in New Orleans over Derek Carr. So he does have that cachet of being able to groom quarterbacks, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Jalen Hurts,
I guess we'll talk about it now since you brought it up. I mean,
I'm just saying, like, that's
I know, but he brought in Miller Moss. For the bowl game against Louisville, 372 yards, 6 touchdowns. They had Malachi Nelson, who was a 5-star quarterback committed to USC. Now he's in Boise, and he just lost his job to a 3-star. So yeah, maybe Lincoln Riley knows something about quarterbacks. So that could be your downfall, because all you need is a quarterback to get hot. The other good thing for Penn State is that they don't play Ohio State until November 2nd. So that gives them time to work in this new offense, to work the kinks out. But it starts day one for Penn State, because I know that we talked about how favorable the schedule is.
Correct.
But Morgantown, West Virginia is one of those places. And if Penn State is not careful, they can find themselves losing that game. They played last season, and I know Penn State won 38-15, but that game was a whole lot closer than the score would tell you.
West Virginia is starting a quarterback that's listed at 5'11", 195. So that means he's 5'10", 160. Like,
all I'm saying is
just size. I mean, granted, it's at home for West Virginia.
Like I told you, first time they hosted Penn State since 1992. This is a big deal in Morgantown.
Then you're gonna have to. You can't get punked. You can't get punked like you did against Michigan, where McCarthy didn't throw the ball the whole second half.
Yeah, so they brought in
Tom.
Tom.
Win the physical battle.
So they brought in Tom Allen as their defensive coordinator. He was Indiana's coach last year, got removed. Replacing Manny Diaz. From what I've researched and what I've gathered, his defense isn't that much different from what Manny Diaz runs. So there's going to be a level of comfortability there. Penn State had the number 1 defense in the country last year as far as yards per game. So they're stingy. Like, even the Ohio State game last year, they ran a fumble back for a touchdown. It was supposed to be tied at 13. Penalty on the play, and Ohio State was in the red zone. So once that happened, the game was over. So just saying, look out for Penn State. I'm not saying that I'm picking them to do anything.
I liken Penn State very much to, like, I won't say like the Cowboys, but like this being relevant. I think that 4-16 record, because we talked about this before, that 4-16 versus Ohio State and Michigan would probably get most coaches fired. But I think there's probably a sentiment in the building, like, you know what, that those teams just are better. They're going to be better than us because of
he's a great recruiter. You know what I mean?
The well that they can get, like, they can just get deeper into the well. And
I think that's the thing, right? Lose to Ohio State and Michigan. Don't be out here losing to Minnesota. Don't be out here losing to Iowa. Like,
so as long as you can 9-3 and 10-2 consistently, I think they're good with that, because that their stadium, you need to do the whiteout game. You can't do that if half the fans don't show up because you keep firing coaches because you think you should be doing X, Y, and Z. Like, listen, we're relevant. We just need maybe a couple more players or a couple players to go our way, and we could beat Michigan or we beat Ohio State. You need a year like this year where you only play one of them.
I do like
you got your coin tosses, 50-50. It's like, if we can get Ohio State this year, this could be the year that it's 12 teams in the playoffs. We can make some stuff happen. I think it was and we talked about Ohio State earlier, firing Ryan Day. I think it would be a mistake to fire him after this season. I would see how it plays out for other schools.
I know they just excluded him until about 2031, so they shouldn't have to worry about that. And, but I do like your comparison because, like I always say, the Cowboys haven't won the Super Bowl since 95. The 49ers won it the year before that. Notre Dame won it in 88. Penn State's last title was the year before that. So there you go. There's your comparison, and there's your history lesson for the day. So let's take it over to Lincoln, Nebraska. The Cornhuskers got a lot of hype this year. People are thinking that this is the year that they turn it around. They haven't been in a bowl game since 2016. 2016. They have not been
five wins get you in a bowl game.
Well, 5 wins gets you in a bowl game if there's not enough qualified 6 and 6 teams. Yes.
That's what I'm saying. It's been a few.
Colorado could have made a bowl last year if they would have won 5 games.
That's what I'm saying. So it's been a few teams that so even 6 wins.
And speaking of Colorado, that's the game that Nebraska's season hinges on. Now, the bad news for them is that they play them in week 2. So they're starting a first-time quarterback who has all the talent in the world. He's got Nebraska lineage, and apparently he is the Kobe to Patrick Mahomes' MJ, and he even looks like Patrick Mahomes.
Wears 15. The school is sponsored by Adidas. He wears Pat Mahomes shoes.
Red jersey.
Same haircut.
You know what I mean? So the thing I want to tell people, though, is slow down because it's usually year 3 that Matt Rule's teams take off. Temple, Baylor, year 3. We're only in year 2 right now. So you might want to slow down a little bit.
But does that get expedited when you get a 5-star to decommit from Georgia to come to Nebraska?
Usually it does, but when you lose your left tackle for the season, it might not. So you're starting a new quarterback without your left tackle. So that doesn't have disaster written all over it.
If you're going to be in a conference where you need an offensive lineman, or you're going to be in a state or a region where you need an offensive lineman to step in, that's the region where you're like, you know what? I'm pretty sure I got a literal Cornhusker out here that can step in and play left tackle. If you're a school if you're a finesse school, where you're just playing like Rice, you might not have a guy that can just match your tackle. But Nebraska, I think they'll probably get a guy to either slide over or step in, and they'll still be able to air it out. I like him. I like him as I like him because they got like this little beef with Colorado. I think that's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's always been a rivalry going back to the days of the Big 8.
I also like that they only have Ohio State, so I think that's their toughest matchup. And if you can score 21 points against Iowa, you might go from 5 and 7, 9 and 3.
Well, I got my eye on 2 games for Nebraska. Like I said, the Colorado game, and then I'm looking at October 5th when your Scarlet Knights go into Nebraska, because that's another team that's getting some hype this year. So we're going to see, because when I look at Nebraska's schedule, very favorable, if they lose to Colorado, I feel like they should win every other game up until the Rutgers game. They should probably beat Rutgers. And then they get 2 road games after that. They go to USC later. They go to Iowa later. So if Nebraska could finish, I'd say 8-4. That's a great season. I'm leaning more 7-5. I'm leaning more 7-5.
I think they can go 8-4 with losses to the team that you probably would project them to lose to. 1 loss to Colorado, Rutgers, Ohio State, USC.
Yeah,
and that's 8-4. So I think all these other games are winnable.
But I got them losing to Iowa too. But you know what I mean. So over in Kinnick. So we'll see.
We'll see how Raiola is, if he can command or put defensive coordinators to a position where, I know Iowa plays probably like the top defense in the country. They're probably ranked top 5, I believe, in like scoring defense. But if you could get a guy loose and he can fire that thing to him, and you got to make these adjustments, because it's gonna show throughout the weeks. If he can, maybe he challenges the defensive backfield for Colorado and like really puts them on their heels, and people kind of put on notice, like, whoa, this guy.
Well, I mean, that would be big. Colorado. It's only his 2nd game.
Yeah, so
And it's a late game. It's a 7:30 game on NBC too. So,
NBC prime time. Yeah. So sometimes you just need those kind of moments to where it clicks. Like, oh yeah, this is it. Like I think, like I said, we talked about Caleb Williams at USC. When he was at Oklahoma, when he came in for Spencer Rattler, and he led that comeback against Texas. It was like, oh, that's all it took. And I'm pretty sure, obviously, he was displaying his talent in practice and therefore, but it's like you get on the field and then you make what essentially could be deemed as impossible happen. And it's like, oh, now you just ride. He rode that way for 2.5 years. Now he's in the NFL because of it. It could be something as simple as that Donald Raiola. Like, you know what? This is my Super Bowl. Like, Shedeur Sanders is going to be the great college quarterback matchup. It's going to be conversations like Shedeur is going to get drafted at this year. Raiola is going to have a couple more years. Are we going to be seeing? And I think if he can rise to that moment, those expectations, then it could be, like I said, it could accelerate your 3-year plan for Matt Rule. Could be a 2-year plan.
Could be. I'm not betting on it though. Wisconsin is bringing in Tyler.
That's how you respectfully disagree. I'm not betting on it though.
Wisconsin is bringing in Tyler Van Dyke. You know what I'm saying? If that name sounds familiar, that's because 2 years ago, he was supposed to be the next great quarterback. He was down at the University of Miami, had a great freshman season, and everybody said, hey, in the NFL draft, this guy is already a top 10 pick. And then he's been nondescript ever since. He's been a little injured. He's been playing shitty. So he finds himself up in Wisconsin where they're still trying to change their offense from smash mouth to air read. So, they got Phil Longo in as the offensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator for Sam Howell down in North Carolina. So they brought him in to try to help Luke Fickell change this system. I think this is the make or break year for Wisconsin to figure out if it's feasible or not, because you expect some knocks in year one, right? Like, trying to learn the new system. They started 4-0 or so last year, and then it all fell apart. But this year, it really, really comes to fruition because, September 14th, you got Bama coming in. Then you go to USC. And matter of fact, props to Alabama, because I've been talking about for years how they haven't played a true road game, out of conference against somebody since 2011 when they went to Happy Valley. So here we are 13 years later. Salute Alabama for going to Madison, Wisconsin. But then the week after that, they play USC at the Coliseum. They go to Rutgers 2 weeks after that. They get Penn State 2 weeks after that. They get Iowa on the road the week after that. And then they they host Oregon and go to Nebraska. So Wisconsin is staring down the barrel of 6-6 unless they can get this offense going. They lose Braylon Allen to the NFL. He's a New York Jet now.
Yeah.
But they still have Ches Malusi, who averaged 6 yards per carry, but he's injured a lot. So, so one thing you got to do, as Mr. Logical brought up, you got to block. You got to be able to run the ball. You can air raid all you want, but you got to have the threat to run the ball. And I just don't know if Wisconsin has enough talent overall to reverse their fortunes from last season. So Michigan State went out and got Jonathan Smith. He was the head coach at Oregon State. He's bringing with him Aiden Childs, one of the most talented quarterbacks in the country, albeit very young. There were times last year where I watched Oregon State and I said, just sit DJ down and start this guy. He's electric. He was a true freshman. So, he's got him at least for 2 years if he can keep him there. But Michigan State doesn't necessarily have a lot of talent elsewhere. So, it's going to be one of those things where Mel Tucker was a pretty good coach. He had the shit go on, he don't know how to act on the phone, know what I'm saying? So he's out of there now. And, where's Michigan State? Because they lost a lot of players because you get the 30-day window to transfer, when you lose a head coach. Their defense has been ranked 13th or lower in the Big Ten the last 3 years. They got no depth on the defensive line. So basically what I'm saying is Michigan State going to get a whole lot of ass whooping this year.
And they got Ohio State, Oregon, and Michigan this year.
in consecutive weeks. Who came up with that schedule?
So they got Boston College, Ohio State, Oregon, Iowa, Michigan.
See what I'm saying?
They
Who
try to
is,
get more people fired.
you know, you
Who
gotta
signed
be
off on this?
you gotta be into S&M to make somebody play Michigan and Iowa back to back.
It's gonna be a lot of guys that are gonna play in one of those games.
Yeah, somebody's getting
Coach,
hurt.
my hamstring tight. My hamstring tight, coach. Yeah,
Yes.
that's a lot. First of all, if you think about it, Boston College is one of those smash mouth teams. Like if you want to get a draft, if you want to draft an offensive lineman, Boston College plays a good place to get one. Linebackers, very just stout players. Ohio State, obviously, they're gonna beat you up inside,
You
and then
better
they're gonna
hope
make
it's
you.
not a bandana game because I think is it at BC?
It's at BC
Yes, at
September
BC. You better hope it's
21st.
not a bandana game.
I know that was a big 9/11 hero story, so it could be if that's their first game after 9/11. So it could
Because
be one
I
of
know
those
they
games.
play Florida State on Labor Day. Boston College does.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, it might be that game because last year that bandana game almost got Florida State. Florida State had to come back.
Let me double check. No, they have no. Yeah. So this is gonna be their first home game after 9/11.
The bandana game. Yeah.
Yeah. So
you're already in trouble.
You're already in trouble, and they're gonna run a pro style offense, and then your defense is shaky at best.
Yeah, they got Bill O'Brien in there now. You know,
this could be 3-9 looks realistic.
It looks realistic. You know, I got them at 4-8, but yeah, 3-9 is a thing. You know, so we talked about the national champion. There was another team that played in that game. They are the University of Washington. So, what the hell is Washington going to be this year? Michael Penix gone. Roma Dunze gone. Jalen Polk gone. Jalen McMillan gone. You know, some of that offensive line that won the offensive line of the year gone. You know, they got Will Rogers coming in from Mississippi State to take over at quarterback. Will Rogers. If only he could have the Pirate Mike Leach coaching him again. Rest in peace, because that's the only time he ever did anything in his career. You know, they brought in Jeremiah Hunter, who was Cal's best receiver the last 2 years. They're hoping for Denzel Boston to step up in that receiver room. They brought in Jonah Coleman from Arizona, over 800 yards last year, 6.8 yards per carry, following new head coach Jed Fish from Arizona. Took Arizona to 10-4 last year. So Washington is going to be that team. They could either be somewhere along the lines of 8-4, or they could have a losing season. They could be 5-7. They're trying to make a lot of stuff gel.
Yeah, I think the culture is going to keep them above 500, 7-5 minimum.
But it's a new culture. It's a new coach.
Yeah, but it's still the weight room, the location, the fandom, the upper management, like the recent history of success. That doesn't just wash away when you bring in, a new coach. And I get there's going to be changes, but I can't imagine that it's going to be wholesale changes because you have a new coach who was successful at Arizona. So it wasn't as if you're bringing in a guy who's unproven. You brought in the guy who was just recently a head coach. He just won 10 games. You as a team just playing the national championship game.
Washington better keep their eye on him because his alma mater might come open this year. You know what I'm saying? Somebody named Billy Napier is looking over his shoulder.
Out of Florida?
Yeah.
I don't know how you're not successful in Florida.
It
but that's neither here nor there. I've never been a head coach, so I can't speak to it. It just seems.
But then you got Mr. Logical Scarlet Knights, coming back with the 16th ranked defense from last season, 10th against the pass. Washington. We just talked about Washington. Washington could be Rutgers' key game, because now you're at a place where last year Washington would have blew you off the field. Now with all their losses, and we just talked about, you got to win that game if you're Rutgers, because the thing about Greg Schiano, he's a builder. He talks about chopping the wood,
Yeah.
so game by game, year by year, get a little bit better. So this is the year that Rutgers should take off a little bit. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to make the Big Ten title game. You know what I mean? But it just means, for example, they open up with Akron and Howard at home. So 2-0.
Yeah.
They go to Lane Stadium to play Virginia Tech. They beat Virginia Tech last year, but it's a whole different beast going down there. So we'll see what happens. They get Washington the week after that before going to Nebraska. You get Wisconsin and UCLA at home, go to USC, host Minnesota, and you got their quarterback that you brought in. I would say his name, but I can't pronounce it. You know what I'm saying? They go to Maryland, host Illinois, and at Michigan State. So when I look at this schedule, they're coming in high. They smacked Miami around in the bowl game last year, 31-17. It was their first, bowl win in 10 years or so. So Rutgers is building now. Now it's time to apply your knowledge. So 8-4 should be on the table. It should be on the table because when I look at the schedule, you're probably even with Nebraska, but it's at Nebraska. So I lean a little bit Nebraska there. You should probably lose at Virginia Tech. You should probably lose at USC. I'm going to give you another loss just because you're Rutgers. But I can't necessarily point out the other loss.
Maryland?
No, because they lost to Leah. You know what I mean? So, Maryland lost to Leah.
It definitely won't be that rivalry game at Michigan State on the November 30th.
Shouldn't be Michigan State. It shouldn't be Illinois. Brett Bielema might find himself on the hot seat after this season. You better not lose to we're in L.A.
Yeah, that was not a good opening press conference for the Sean Foster.
And I forgot to mention earlier, since I said that, it just hit me again. I forgot to mention, of course, that Ohio State brought in Chip Kelly as their offensive coordinator. The coolest stat in the world about Chip Kelly, because there's not much cool about Chip Kelly.
Yeah, not much.
Yeah, there's not much. Every year that he was at Oregon, his team led the Pac-12 in rushing. When he came to UCLA, every year that he was at UCLA, they finished first or second in the conference in rushing. So that just goes to show you that Ohio State
runs a lot, and they run a lot of plays too.
Yeah, this is going to be that change maybe for the Michigan game. But, I had to say that. But speaking of running the ball, maybe Rutgers visions themselves as Iowa East because last season they ran the ball on 62% of their plays.
So, yeah, they weren't very dynamic.
No, and remember the Ohio State game.
The Ohio State game, they were in scoring territory. Like they were moving the ball early in the second half. It had that weird tip ball interception return for a touchdown. And then basically after that, Ohio State just imposed their will on them.
Yeah.
And just closed the game out with just size. And they threw a couple of touchdown passes to Marvin Harrison to pad his stats for whatever award they were going for, because they didn't need to throw the ball when they were throwing it to him.
Yeah, so that was my favorite part of the show where we get to talk about Iowa. They're bringing in former Western Michigan coach Tim Lester as their offensive coordinator to replace Brian Ferentz, who is the original Nepo baby. So the way that y'all were talking about Bronny James, that's where y'all should have directed the energy. They had to create a limit of him scoring at least 25 points per game for him to keep his job, and he couldn't do it. So in the last couple of years, last year, they were 130th in total offense. The year before that, they were 123. And then the year before that, they were 99th. So they got
132 to 134 qualifying teams for that stat, by the way.
Correct. And you know what I mean? So here we go. Another quiz for you, Mr. Logical.
All right, let's hear it.
How many yards did Iowa's leading wide receiver have last year? Or I'm sorry, not even wide receiver. It wasn't even a wide receiver.
Leading receiver had 447.
He had 299 yards,
Jesus Christ.
and it was a tight end.
Yep, tight
And
end.
he had 40 more receiving yards than their number one receiver. Their top four receivers combined for 754 yards on 76 catches. Their top four had 76 catches. Cade McNamara, old Michigan, he was the guy that J.J. McCarthy took over for. He started out last season, got injured. Deacon Hill came in and completed 48.6% of his passes.
They have zero passing game, is what you're telling me?
Yes, so Cade McNamara is back, but he's in a battle right now for the starting position. So Phil Parker, the defensive coordinator, that guy needs more awards. He's been winning awards, but he needs more. He needs a head coaching job, but he probably doesn't want one because he could have had one.
He needs a statue. He needs a statue outside the stadium because they went 10-4.
Yeah, Big Ten. They have their Big Ten tackling leader, Jay Higgins, back along with Nick Jackson. They did lose Cooper DeJean, but Iowa does defensive backs too. Yeah. So they might be okay.
More white guys. I think they got a couple more white cornerbacks starting this year.
So Iowa could be the team that pisses off the network execs and ends up in the Big Ten title game again. That's who I was thinking about earlier when I made the comment that I made about there's a team out there that could make the Big Ten title game, because if you look at their schedule, they're going to start 3-0. Illinois State, Iowa State, and Troy. They're 5-1 against Matt Campbell at Iowa State. They go to Minnesota. They got revenge on their mind because if you remember, that was the game last year where Cooper DeJean ran the punt back and they called it back because they said he waved for the fair catch. The final score of that game was 12-10, by the way. But they go to Ohio State. After that, on October 5th, they host Washington, go to Michigan State, and play Northwestern. They should win 3 there, all 3 of those. Home against Wisconsin could be a toss-up, but I'm going to give it to them. At UCLA, they should win. At Maryland, they should win. And then Nebraska is the last toss-up game. So literally the only game that I look at on their schedule and say that they should lose is Ohio State. Everything else is, Nebraska's a toss-up. Wisconsin is a slight lean. And then Iowa State is a toss-up.
And we got to see how Washington can score the ball. Like if their offense is humming and if it's moving, if they're 31 points a game up into this matchup, then that can
but it's at Iowa, you know what I mean? So if it's 50 degrees, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. I don't know. But USC, the Trojans, you knew we had to get here to Trojangelis. You know what I'm saying? What do they got? They got Miller Moss. They got Lincoln Riley, of course. The good news for them is that they took over and grabbed UCLA's defensive coordinator, D'Anton Lynn. They're bringing him in. He took UCLA from the 85th defense to the 15th defense. You know what I'm saying? UCLA still has Achille Arnold on defense. They still have Bear Arnold. So they got something to work with on defense. He's not starting Bear. They have these receivers. Everybody's big on their receivers. You got Zachariah Branch, who is their new Reggie Bush, even though he plays receiver. Last year, he had a punt return touchdown, a kickoff return touchdown, and some receiving touchdowns. So he's the game breaker on offense that Miller Moss is going to try to get the ball to. They brought in Woody Marks from Mississippi State, who started 32 games there at running back. So USC, bringing the talent in, we just got to see if they can actually stop somebody. If they can just get to, say, a top 40 defense. If they can just be a top 40 defense, they can make life tough for the rest of the Big Ten.
They are banking on, and I think they're banking on their reputation, like I talked about earlier in the show, as far as some of these teams can play and lose a big game week 1. They got LSU September 1st.
Yeah, in Vegas.
So they can lose that game and just off cachet, just get pushed back up through the rankings. Because right now they're ranked preseason number 23. A good showing, or if you beat LSU, I imagine you skyrocket. You're at
Oh yeah, they beat
16.
LSU. They're probably
You're
going
at
to jump to 15.
16 to
Yeah.
16, 15, 14, somewhere in that range. Or if you lose, but then you come back, the thing is, you could be 1-2
Yeah, because you
heading
go
into
to
Wisconsin.
Michigan. You go to Michigan September 21st on CBS, which used to be the SEC slot.
Yeah, so it could be a tough stretch. I don't know if Lincoln Riley is that good from behind. Pause.
Well,
He
we'll
seems
see.
he's always seemed to be ahead of the curve, especially when they were playing Oklahoma.
See what I know that USC has to hate. So they alternate with Notre Dame. They play Notre Dame every year, but when it's at Notre Dame, they play early in October. Before the cold weather hits. When they play at USC, they play the last game of the season. So I know it sucks to have to play UCLA, your big cross-city rivalry, and then turn right into the Notre Dame game.
Yeah.
So UCLA dominated them last year. They do host Nebraska. They host Penn State. They go to the big house. So, this is not going to be an easy thing for USC. So same thing. 9-3 would be a great season for them. What up, Josh? It would be a great time. We're going to talk about Minnesota in a second, and so USC is going to be the wild card here because they have the ability to mess somebody's season up just off of their talent.
Yeah, but their schedule is looking a lot like 8-4-ish.
You know what I'm saying? Cover your ears, Josh. Then you got my surprise Big Ten team, the Indiana Hoosiers. They're bringing in Kurt Cignetti, from James Madison to be the head coach. So, he's a winner. He's bringing a bunch of James Madison players with him that are winners. They got a pretty easy schedule when you consider, everything. Their rival Purdue could be the worst team in the Big Ten.
Behind Michigan State.
You could be, but as you look at this, they open with FIU in Western Illinois before they go to LA to play UCLA. They play Charlotte and Maryland. So I'm seeing at least 4-1, if not 5-0.
That's 5-0 to me.
They go to Northwestern. I think that's a win. Now it gets a little hairy. You get Nebraska. I'm calling that a loss. What is Washington? You go to Michigan State. You're going to lose to Michigan and Ohio State. So I could see Indiana 7-5 or 8-4.
8-4, yeah.
Yep. Minnesota with 8 starters back on defense. My guy Darius Taylor is a little banged up, Josh. He's a little banged up. But but I think he'll be fine once the season starts. They brought in Max Brosmer, who was the leading passer in FCS last year. He's coming from New Hampshire. You got Joe Rossi, the defensive coordinator.
Leading passer in yards or rating,
yes,
just passing yards.
Yeah. Then you got Joe Rossi. He went to East Lansing to become their defensive coordinator. He was one of the better defensive coordinators in the Big Ten. Like, Minnesota has always been weird to me because outside of the Glenn Mason years, and a few years with PJ Fleck, they don't really have much to report, from the last times when they were dominating, winning national titles back in the 30s and everything like that. But I always feel like they have talent. Like they always have talent. They had Marion Barber. This is like, I don't understand why Minnesota doesn't win more than they do. You know what I mean? But looking at this, they went 6-7 last year, coming off of 2 straight 9-win seasons. But this stretch from September 21st to October 5th, Iowa at home, at Michigan, and then they get
USC at home.
That's going to be a tough stretch. They open up with North Carolina. So I'm surprised they play Iowa that early too, Josh. But like I mentioned a few minutes ago, Iowa's got revenge on their mind for that game last year when that punt return got called back, besides the fact that it's a rivalry game.
They normally play it later. It's like
they normally play it a little bit later. Like, it's usually like late October. And but they go to Wisconsin to close out the season. But they got winnable games on the schedule. They'll beat Rhode Island and Nevada. I just don't know what to make of UCLA. I'm going to give them the Maryland game at home. I'm going to give them the Illinois game.
But at Rutgers,
so can you find 2 more wins? to become bowl eligible. Because, like I said, North Carolina's breaking in a new quarterback as well, and it's at home. So I would like to lean Minnesota, but I just feel like North Carolina's more talented. So, it's just one of those things where what outweighs what. So what Minnesota needs is for Brosmer to continue what he was doing in FCS and just throw the ball all over the yard. And like I said, right at the beginning of this whole preview, what did I say? To make a bowl game in the Big Ten, you just got to be able to score 20 points.
Yeah, not a lot of top tier offenses, but the defense is tough. It's stout, and like I said, it just sometimes it's just a matter of it clicking. Like you say, you got this guy coming from FCS to now, Big Ten, Division I football, limelight, spotlights, USC, glitz and glamour coming in is like, yo, can you stand in the pocket and hit open receivers? Can you continue to do what you did to get you here? For Dylan Raiola in Nebraska, young guy was like, can you do the things that got you recruited? Hitting your skill position players in the hands on the back at the top of your drop. Like, can you just do these things? Because the Big Ten, it blows my mind how, like, Iowa won 10 games. And if they probably didn't have any half where they had back-to-back scoring drives for touchdowns. I mean, if you think about, I haven't done any research, but imagine with the way they were scoring, the fact that they had to put a limiter on their offensive coordinator who was hired by his dad, which I get it. If I ever coach a team, my son will be there with me too. Either he's gonna be playing, or he's gonna be coaching, or he's gonna be at a gym. He's gonna be somewhere. I'm not gonna front nepotism isn't a thing. But if he's underqualified and you can see he's overwhelmed, it's like we have a point system that tells you he's overwhelmed. As long as these teams, when they get their opportunities against, because some of these teams are probably going to be bad. Michigan State's probably going to be bad. Illinois is probably going to be bad.
Northwestern's going to be bad. Purdue's going to be bad.
Purdue's going to be bad.
Maryland's going to be bad.
Based off the press conference, UCLA doesn't seem very promising. You couldn't get if you were a fan of UCLA, the opening press conference, I don't know if that really.
It didn't galvanize.
It didn't galvanize. It didn't create a lot of energy for you as a fan.
You remember who their offensive coordinator is, right?
In UCLA?
Yeah.
I'm drawing a blank. You the names guy.
Our guy, Eric Bieniemy.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be tough because he's hard on players. So that means he doesn't like to lose.
Yeah, and his offense.
It's going to be a lot of guys quitting.
His offense wasn't very good when he was OCing at Colorado, so UCLA, like I said, reminder out there, y'all, they are in LA. The LA and UCLA stands for Los Angeles. That's where they're located. So this is the craziest thing. They got Ethan Garbers at quarterback, highly regarded. I thought Dante Moore was better, but Dante Moore is now in Oregon backing up Dylan Gabriel. I don't know what it is, right? So last season, they were talking to Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly was still the head coach of UCLA.
Correct.
He referred to Ethan Garbers as his brother Chase. And the crazy part about it is Chip Kelly didn't even coach Chase. Chase went to Cal. But that's how nondescript Ethan Garbers is.
Or it's just how nondescript Chip Kelly is.
Yeah, so UCLA does have a receiver that I like, J. Michael Sturdivant. So if they can get him the ball, they should be fine. But they lost a lot last year, especially on defense. So, I'm not expecting anything from UCLA. We talked about Michigan State. Purdue won the contest for how the hell did you get that schedule? Saying besides the fact that this is year 2 of Ryan Walters. He was the defensive coordinator at Illinois before he came over to Purdue. They still got Hudson Card at quarterback, who Josh knows very well, from down in Texas. They start off with Indiana State, and you're like, okay, way to start the season with a win. Then they get Notre Dame the next week. You go to Corvallis to play Oregon State, so you might win that game. Oregon State lost a lot. Then you get Nebraska, go to Wisconsin. Go to Illinois, then you follow that up with a home game with Oregon. Then you get Northwestern, you go at Ohio State, Penn State at home back-to-back, at Michigan State, and close with Indiana. So if Purdue makes a bowl game, salute to them.
Or if they end up 4-8, it's just more of the same.
It's
Maybe
just
5
more
and
of the same.
5-7. We'll call it an improvement year.
Yeah,
That'll
and you got to give
baby
their.
step.
I think, and this is where, like, I think after a schedule like this, you got to give the coach another year. You know what I mean? Unless you go 1-10 or like 2-9 or 2-10 or 1-11.
You got Notre Dame,
Oregon
State,
Penn State,
Nebraska, Oregon,
Ohio State,
Northwestern.
Nebraska.
I think you're in the situation where, well, you have the bookend where you got Northwestern and Michigan State on the front end and the back end of the Ohio State Penn State game. So you'll get a couple of wins
if you're not too beat up and discouraged by then because you lost 55-3.
Yeah, but you're gonna beat Michigan State 33-10.
Maybe.
But you're gonna get that. You're getting one of those. You're getting one of those lick back.
But I think Northwestern is the worst team in the Big Ten. They bring 7 starters back. They kept David Braun on. He was the interim coach. Took over last year after some crazy circumstances. That was the hazing in the locker room. Coach Pat Fitzgerald suing the school for wrongful termination and all that good stuff like that. They won. The reason I don't like them so much this year is because they don't have any playmakers on offense. They don't have a quarterback. And they won, I'm big on this. They won 6 one-possession games last year.
Yeah, the ball's not going to bounce the same way 2 years
ago. It's not going to bounce the same way. But Illinois has a chance to be the worst team in the conference too because, they got Luke Altmaier back, who everybody seems to think is good but me. He came over from Ole Miss last year. This is how good Luke Altmaier is. He's so good that he got hurt. And his backup came in and threw for 507 yards, which is a school record. That's how good Luke Altmaier is. That his backup did that. But his backup, I think, is actually a Falcon right now, if I remember correctly. John Paddock, I believe he plays for the Falcons.
Practice squad guy.
Tennessee is, Illinois is having to replace Johnny Newton. We talked about him. He's a commander now. They're replacing Keith Randolph as well. They get back-to-backs at Nebraska and Penn State, but then they also play Michigan at Oregon. They get Kansas. They get them in Champaign, but if you go back to last year, Kansas ran for 262 yards against them, and I expect Illinois' defense to be worse. They got receivers, though, but the receivers don't play defense.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Maryland, like I said, they lost Talia. What was that? Nature moved to Mossy. Nothing left to say. Nature just moved to Mossy. Maryland last year started 6-0. Finished 6-6. The year before that, they got the North Carolina dive thing going on where they start off with a weak schedule. And then they pay for it later because even if you look at their schedule this year, they start off with UConn. So they get Michigan State. They go to Virginia. They get Villanova. They go at Indiana and host Northwestern. So that is their first 6 games.
Yeah, so
that could be 5-1. It could be 4-2. It could be 6-0. But then USC at Minnesota, at Oregon, Rutgers, Iowa, at Penn State. They're probably going to lose out.
Well, I mean, listen, you have the benefit of not playing Ohio State or Michigan. You have some favorable road games, like you got UVA at Indiana. Minnesota could be tough. But you have favorable road games. You have all your tough games at home. So you got USC at home. You got Iowa at home. And then you finish the year out with Penn State on the road. Who knows what Penn State's going to be by then. They might be beatable. But yeah, I like their chances to be, 9-3 again, hit the bowl game, or 9-4 after a bowl game loss.
Yeah.
Because like I said, when you have tough games at home, and like I said, we have no idea if USC transitions well. Like we haven't seen it. So that could be a win that they get. Shiano is very vanilla in his play calling and his personnel groupings. Like you said, they ran the ball 62% of the time. Like you can't do that. You get down 14, like you said, the ball bouncing one way. You got to come out, initial drive, touchdown. Rutgers run the hell out of the ball, fumble, scoop, score. Now they're down 14. Rutgers got to get out of their character and start throwing the ball around. You steal a win that way. So if USC doesn't gel, we don't know.
So I'm going to do something I don't want to do. My Big Ten title game is Ohio State over Penn State.
Yeah, so you just went full chalk then, huh?
No, chalk would have been Ohio State and Oregon.
I guess I have to see Penn State in these moments.
Because, they're number 2 and number 3 right now, Ohio State and Oregon.
I just feel like Penn State has to show me that they have real championship pedigree. Because if you think about the guys that get drafted off their offensive defensive line, you got Michael Parsons, Arnold Katie down in Atlanta. They're just such a tough team. It's like, how are you not winning? How are you 4-16 versus Michigan and Ohio State?
Because they don't get the skill position players at receiver is usually what it is. They bringing in Juan Fleming from Ohio State this year. He's their big transfer portal pull-in. So, I'm going to roll with them. They got the new offensive coordinator, Smash Mouth Football, Nick Singleton. I'm going to just ride with Penn State. They're going to lose, though. Ohio State's going to win the Big Ten. But, like I said, I think Oregon just has a lot. They got too much to replace that they're relying on the portal for my liking.
Yeah, but like I said, you got a seasoned quarterback in his third school. I think he battled back from some injuries. So, sometimes that's how you win those one possession games, when you just have that guy that refuses to lose. And we talked about, like, right now in the background, I have a replay of LSU and Auburn from some years back. YouTube just randomly played it. But I remember before Joe Flacco's year where they went on that run where they considered arguably the greatest college football run, they didn't end the year well before that, but he had went through it, had to transfer from Ohio State, had to be kind of relegated to like the third or fourth guy. Then you're the man in LSU, your season doesn't end well, and then you come out like gangbusters, and it all kind of just comes together that following year.
So who you picking?
I'm willing to go. Ohio State just seems like it just lifts right off the page. Like, I don't even know who they're gonna play. I don't see how anybody beats them. It just seems like it's all kind of set up for them. Like, they kept their coach. Yeah, they got a new quarterback, but it's like you got Chip Kelly in there. He's gonna get you points. You have probably some of the best running backs. You keep a good solid tight end. I just feel like they just kind of lift off the page. Multiple choice tests, when you get the answer right, when the questions seem to come off the page. Ohio State seems to be that piece that comes off the page. Whoever they play, I think they're going to beat.
Yeah, so like I said, for me, Ohio State, we'll get to Georgia in a few days when we do our SEC preview, because Georgia's got a schedule on them. So for me, Ohio State is in the driver's seat to win the national title this year. I'm not saying that they will. I'm not picking it yet, but I'm just saying, like, they're in the driver's seat as far as just looking at schedules, talent, and just trying to combine everything. Because Georgia goes to Alabama this year, and I think they can come down here to play Texas. They come down to play Ole Miss. So, and you still got your rivalry games with Florida and Tennessee. So, yeah. So don't be surprised if, I'm not going to say they won't, but don't be surprised if Georgia doesn't make the playoff.
Or if they don't look as dominant. So
yeah, don't forget.
They can look vulnerable week to week.
And don't forget
that preview.
Don't forget, in 12 days from now, they play Clemson. You know what I'm saying? And that neutral site in Atlanta. Well, that one might be a neutral site. Clemson is in South Carolina. That one could be a neutral site.
That could be a little bit more favorable, yeah.
Yeah. So, but we will be back on Thursday, to talk about the best conference in the country, the SEC. Will Alabama stay Alabama? Will Georgia stay Georgia? Will somebody new come through? What are the newcomers going to do? Is there going to be more than one coach in the SEC fired during the regular season? We'll have to see. But he is the even kill, Mr. Logical, warning you, imploring you not to bring feelings to a fact fight.
Don't do it.
And I am 2-5, going left a whole lot more than Deontay Wilder could ever imagine. So we will be back. Like, review, subscribe, share, rate, do all the good things, do all the free things. We love you. Peace.